I'm a one-man band. It's what's called a one-man band. I shoot, I edit, I produce, I report, I anchor. You can drop me anywhere in the world. And I have a backpack with all of my gear and a small little satellite dish, a drone. You can just put me anywhere in the world. And today I can, churn out a story in about, a couple of hours, write it, produce it, shoot it, and upload it. And it's a game changer. And really, actually, this right here, these devices are a game changer.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Pro Tips from Global News Alliance. I am Sam Ebersole, Director of Training for GNA. In this series, we interview working journalists who share their experience and expertise, and all of this to promote journalistic storytelling that will advance the kingdom of God. And today we're excited to have as our guest George Thomas, Senior International Correspondent and co-anchor for CBN News. George, you've been with Christian Broadcasting Network for more than 20 years. You've been to more than 100 countries. We're just so fortunate to have you with us today to share from your vast experience and expertise.
It's a pleasure to be on and excited to deposit just a little bit of what I've learned over the last almost 30 years, actually,
Wow.
Sam. I can't believe this. Oh, my goodness. But thrilled to be on and just a blessing to share a little bit of what God has been doing in my life and what he's doing around the world.
Awesome. Well, let's begin by having you tell us a little bit about your background and how journalism became your calling.
Yeah. So I like to say I had a dream when I was 6 years old. My father was a banker where we grew up. I was born in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, on the east coast of Africa, and then we moved to Lusaka, Zambia. And my father was a banker all his life, and he traveled the world. And every time he came home, he would come back with different souvenirs. But more importantly, he was an avid photographer, and so he would take pictures. And I remember fondly, Sam, about 2-3 weeks after he came back, he would develop his pictures, and they came in slide form. I'm sure many of your viewers don't even know what I'm talking about, but back then we had a projector, and my mom would make various Indian dishes and African dishes, and we would gather together as a family, and the lights would be turned off in the entire room, in the living room, and then the projector would start, and it would be beamed on this white wall, and my father would tell stories of different cultures, people, religions, cuisines that he ate. And so when I was 6 years old, I had this dream to travel the world. I wanted to travel the world. And then I also had this dream to be a reporter. I don't know how it came to be, but I was fascinated by this idea of being a reporter, but more importantly, the chance to travel around the world. I will say I just got back about a week and a half ago from Tashkent, Uzbekistan. And every time, Sam, I get on a plane, the door of the plane, either step on the plane or step off the plane, every time I cross a land border, either by car, ship, or train, I pinch myself. And I pinched myself a week and a half ago when I landed back home here in the United States. I have pinched myself, Sam, tens of thousands of times, because it's just a reminder that this Indian boy growing up in Africa, when he was 6 years old, he had a dream to travel the world. And today I'm living that dream, and incredible privilege and the honor to illuminate and chronicle the move of God around the world. I mean, all my stories are not necessarily Christian, don't have a Christian angle, but just a chance to travel the globe today and have a front row seat to so many of our global events in the last 30 years has been a tremendous privilege and honor. And it's a dream. It's a dream to do what I do, and just an honor to work for CBN News, and have a platform that I do to be able to tell stories from a different perspective that you don't necessarily see on your mainstream media outlets. And so that's how I got into it. And it's been almost 30 years in the making. Yeah.
Wow. Well, and just so you know, I'm old enough. I remember Kodak carousel projectors and Kodachrome film.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. And they're coming back.
They
They're
are.
coming back.
They are. Um, so one other thing that we have in common, George, is we're both graduates of Regent University, and I
Correct.
just
Yes.
noticed that in 2023 they named you Alumni of the Year.
I know. What were they
That
thinking?
must have been
I
such an
mean,
honor.
like, no, I jokingly said to them, that I graduated back in 1995, and I had a chance to give us a short speech, and on the day of the, and what was even more precious was that my oldest son was in the graduating class of 2023. So it was a very special moment that he'd be graduating, and all these years later, I would be recognized as Regent's Alumni of the Year. So that was a tremendous honor. But I jokingly said to them, "My goodness, how many wars do you need me to cover? How many times do you want me to cheat death before you present me with this award?" But it was also very special that it was the late Pat Robertson's. He was the chancellor at Regent University, and it was his last time. Just a few months later, he had passed away, and so it was a very very special moment and a tremendous honor as well to receive that award.
That is fantastic. And I saw where your son said something about, I hope that we can, and speaking of you and him, can continue
Yeah.
to minister, and reach the world. And I just thought that was great. He's obviously following in your
He
footsteps. So
is. He
that's great.
is, yes. But that apple didn't fall too far from the tree.
So just looking at places you've been recently, you've been to Sudan,
Mm,
Israel, Russia, Ukraine, Nigeria, Kenya, China,
yeah.
Cuba. It seems like you're everywhere, or at least everywhere where the world appears to be on fire. What is it like reporting from the front lines? Wars, famines, natural disasters,
Yeah.
events of epic proportion. What is it like?
Yeah, it's been quite remarkable, over the last 30 years, if you can just imagine all the wars that have erupted from Afghanistan to Syria to Iraq to Nigeria to Gaza to the war in Lebanon. I was in South Lebanon a couple of months ago, right before the Israeli war started. But then I was also in right on the border of Gaza after the October 7th attack. No, it's one of those things where I remember when the United States launched its war against Afghanistan shortly after 9/11. I walked into my boss's office and I said to him, "I want to go to Kabul."
Mhm.
And he says, "Are you kidding? No, I'm not going to send you to Kabul. There's a war." And I told him, I said, "Rob, have you seen the color of my skin?" I said, "There's a reason why God created me the way I am. And part of it is that God has allowed me to go into these places, and because of my ethnicity, my background, my Indian African roots, I've had the chance to go into these places, be able to blend in into some very very dangerous places. Sam, I don't have enough fingers or toes to count the number of times I've almost lost my life in different conflict zones, not necessarily all conflict zones, but it's a calling. It's not an adrenaline rush. Sure, it is, but it's something that I feel truly called to do. And I feel like I'm able to go into these places that my white colleagues
Mhm.
cannot necessarily go into. It's dangerous. It's very risky for them. It also started me on a journey about 17 years ago as technology changed. We went from the beta cams, the heavy beta cams, right, to digital. Went from analog to digital, and that was a game changer. And I realized I'm also just like my father. I'm an avid photographer, love to take pictures. And as the technology changed, I realized, I want to start shooting my own stuff. And so for the last 17 years, I'm a one-man band. It's what's called a one-man band. I shoot, I edit, I produce, I report, I anchor. You can drop me anywhere in the world. And I have a backpack with all of my gear and a small little satellite dish, a drone. You can just put me anywhere in the world. And today, I can and churn out a story in about a couple of hours, write it, produce it, shoot it, and upload it, and it's a game changer. And really, actually, this right here, these devices are a game changer. I cannot tell you how often I film with my phone. In fact, when I had a chance to cover the war in Ukraine, I arrived in Ukraine on February 10th. 2023, with the anticipation of staying there for 2 weeks because I had a sense that the Russians were going to invade on February 24th or February 25th. So I booked my return flight on February 23rd to come back. And then on February 23rd, the insurance company that insures all planes around the world, at this time I was in Kiev, sent out a red alert saying that any plane that crosses into Ukrainian airspace will not be insured. And like a domino, all the flights, the entire flights coming in and out of Ukraine were canceled. Called my boss up and I said to him, I said, look, my flight this evening back to the United States has been canceled. He said, what do you want to do? I said, give me 24 hours. Let me pray about it. I knew I had some options. I could drive to Poland, to the Polish border. I could go to Belarus, go to Estonia, Romania. There's a number of ways I could get out. I said, give me 24 hours and I'll let you know. Well, February 24th at 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm in downtown Kyiv, and the Russian bombs started dropping. And I knew I was in the biggest story of my career. And I ended up spending 4 months in Ukraine covering the war, crisscrossing the entire country. And like you said, I've had a chance over the last 30 years to have a front row seat at all of our major geopolitical events of our day, from earthquakes to tsunamis to wars to terrorist attacks. I've covered them all. And it's incredible. It really is. I'm by nature, I'm a very curious person. I'm genuinely a very curious person. And I think a lot of that stems from my parents. My father gave me the love for the world. My mother gave me the love for culture and religion and cuisine, and so those two combinations gives me just insatiable appetite to learn about people. And I say to my friends who don't get a chance to travel as much as I do, I encourage them to travel because the more you travel, I have found, Sam, the less prejudicial you are. The more open-minded you are. You'll get a chance to meet people who don't look like you, smell like you, eat like you, dress like you. And the more you travel, the more you realize, wow, what a beautiful world we live in and how God created all these different people and the linguistics, the languages, the cultures, the rich history in these cultures. I just got back from Uzbekistan, went to Kazakhstan, the countries of the former Soviet Union in Central Asia. Just tremendous, thousands of years of history in these cultures, and it's amazing to be able to do these stories and have the experience to be on the front lines, so to speak, and to report. And it's incredible. I will say, like being in Ukraine, I was not ready. I just had a sense. I could call it a God sense, this intuition that the war was going to start on the 24th or the 25th. And I'd been going to Ukraine, Sam, since 2000, the first invasion. In fact, it's so weird. I happened to be in Sevastopol, Crimea, the day the Russians invaded Crimea. I just happened to be there. And I've subsequently been taking several trips to Ukraine, been in Mariupol, in the Donbass region, in the eastern part of Ukraine before the Russians took it over. And to be there in Ukraine, those 4 months were, I didn't bring my helmet. I didn't bring my bulletproof vest. I had nothing. I was totally naked, so to speak.
Wow.
But God protected me. And and I've got a band of sort of journalistic brothers and sisters who cover wars, and we've sort of connected, and we as soon as an event happened and we're in the field, we communicate on various secure platforms, and we look out for each other, and we got each other's back, even though we're all trying to get the story, but we all want to be safe in the field, and we're always sharing intelligence and threat assessments with our various security personnel. But it's, to be able to do these stories and to be able to blend in to these communities, I can tell you, if it hadn't been for my ethnicity, I would not be alive today. It's the absolute truth. That's why I don't take, when I go in the field, I don't take people who are Americans, who are white. It's not a racist comment, but it's just the reality. So my white colleagues going into Afghanistan, into Syria, into Iraq. I was in Iraq during the height of the insurgency, shortly after the United States invaded Iraq and the overthrow of Saddam Hussein, and spent several months back and forth into Iraq. And during the height of the insurgency, I was able to blend in because, sometimes people think I'm Middle Eastern, or they take me for Italian, or they take me for Latin. It's only when I open my mouth do they realize this brother is not talking like an Indian. So it's, once I start speaking, they're like, wait a minute, but that has really helped me in my career for sure.
Wow. So I've only asked a couple of questions, and you've just made me think of eight follow-ups that I need to ask you. But
Sure. Yep.
there's
Go
so
for
much
it.
of wisdom that you have, so much knowledge, so much experience. But what you described is exactly why we need to train more Christian
Mm,
journalists in their countries. They already have. They look like the people. They already have the language
yeah.
skills. They have the cultural skills. They know how to fit in and get to the heart of the crux of the issue and be able to report on it. An outsider coming in has so many more challenges, and like you say, you have some
Oh,
advantages certainly over someone like me trying to come in
yeah.
from outside. So again, thank you for what you do, but just encouragement to our students who might live in
Mm,
Africa or might live in Asia or might live in Latin America. Um,
yeah.
we need you on the ground telling stories about what God's doing in your part of the world. And you
Correct.
talked
Yeah.
about the technology, and it is incredible. In fact, that was one of the questions that I have for later. But it is
Hmm.
incredible what is available to us now. But the way that you have learned to be a journalist and ask questions and probe
Hmm.
and go after the real story, I mean, that takes some time to develop. So sometimes it might be easier to give somebody the technology than to
Yeah.
train them how to be a good journalist, how to ask good questions. But
Yeah.
but let me ask you a question. Is there one story that you reported on that had an impact that you could not have predicted, that no one could have predicted, that just went places that you just didn't realize?
Yeah. Um, One of my favorite stories I did several years ago about it took me to the Siberian tundra. This African boy has not seen that kind of cold or snow in my life. I went to the Yamal Peninsula, right on the Arctic Circle. And the story was this gentleman who came from a very remote tribe that lives on the Arctic Circle. They're called the Ninets people, and there's probably about 65, 70,000 of them, and they're nomadic people. They basically live off of the land. They are reindeer herders, and that's their livelihood. And so there's a ministry that I've worked with for many, many years called Mission Eurasia, and they do a lot of work in the countries of the former Soviet Union. And so one day I was doing an interview with Sergei Rakuba, a very good friend. In fact, we were just together a couple of weeks ago in Central Asia. And so I was doing an interview with him, and I know that they do ministry in Siberia. So he was in DC, and I was talking to him in my IFB, and I said, Sergey, I said, I want to go to the Siberian tundra. I want to go do a story about how God is moving up in the Arctic Circle. He said, sure, I'll arrange it. Let's do it during the summertime. I said, no, Sergey. I said, I want to go in the dead of winter. He says, do you know how cold it is in Siberia? I said, no, but I'm going to find out, and I want to do it. And so we went to the Yamal Peninsula. Average temperatures, Sam, hover between minus
Mm.
65 and minus 69 degrees. It is so freaking cold. I have never experienced such cold like this before, but it was incredible. Look, I think for your viewers in different parts of the world, it's one thing to go out and tell a story. It's another thing to be curious. You have to have a curiosity, your genuine curiosity about people. And I do. I truly do. I love to, I tell people that in the olden days, again, your viewers may, folks who are watching this probably don't remember the old phone book that would get thrown on our driveways, right? That big yellow with thousands of pages of phone numbers. That's how we figured out people's phone numbers back in the day, right? And I tell people that I can open a phone book, close my eyes, open the phone book to a random page and go and point my finger at somebody's house and address. I can drive up to their home and they will have a story to tell. Everybody has a story to tell. And part of being a good journalist is asking good questions, but also being a good listener, also being a good listener. One of the things that I do when I do interviews is that I don't have a notepad. I don't even use my phone. If you're married or if you're in a relationship with somebody, how often do you hear your wife or your significant other say to you, "Are you listening to me? Are you paying attention to me?" Right? Because they can tell, right? If your eyes are darting all over the place, if you're fidgety and so forth. So part of my process when I do an interview is whether it's with the former president of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, or if it's a farmer on the outskirts of Tashkent, Uzbekistan. I am all eyes. They have my undivided attention, and I'm looking at them all the time. I'm not looking down at my notes. I'm paying attention. I have come so prepared that I know the person like the back of my hand. I've done all of my research, so that everything is in my mind, and so it's a casual conversation with somebody as opposed to being, because the thing is, I tell people there are few professions in this world, except for your local police, your state police, the FBI, or the CIA. No other profession where you can come up to a total stranger, put a camera in their face, and convince them to tell you some of the most intimate details of their lives. Nobody else will open up to you, right? But that is the power of being a journalist, of having a camera in your hand and being able to tell somebody's story. Like I said, except for the CIA, FBI, state police, local police, nobody else. You can't just come up to somebody on the street and ask them, start asking them. They'll be like, who are you? Why should I tell you these things? That's why I cannot stress how important it is that when you go into somebody's home, that you respect their time, that you honor them, and you are, you respect them by asking good questions. When I have a chance many times to go and teach at various universities in our area, sometimes I get to go to other places and talk about what it's like to be a foreign correspondent, to be a war correspondent. And I can always tell by the person's opening questions. I can tell whether they've done their research on me because I'm a public person. You can Google me, and I can always tell if you've done your research when you're coming to interview me, right? So it's the same thing. It's that idea of having good questions, having good follow-up questions, but also being attentive and listening, being a good listener, because sometimes you can be so consumed by your questions, right? That the person says something and he drops or she drops a nugget of gold and you're just busy, focusing on your questions, that you miss maybe a part of the interview that totally takes you into another another direction, right? Or to maybe opens up a whole different story than what you were thinking you were going to get. So it's just one of those things. You have to be curious.
Earlier, you said that you sometimes shoot stories on location with your smartphone.
Hmm.
Are there any special tips or tricks that you have for our students, many of whom that's going to be their only option is shooting,
Yeah, yeah,
even editing on their smartphone and uploading it? Any
yes.
special ideas or tricks that you've learned over the years of doing that?
Yeah, so my style, if I do have a cameraman, most of the time I don't, but I always tell people you got to get close. Get close to the action. Don't be a participant way back over here. If there is an explosion or a fire or something that's dramatic, you want to get, for example, if there's a fire, I want to hear the crackling of the embers. I want to hear that, right? And the reality is that not everything is perfect, right, in life. So, for example, when I'm doing a stand up, what's called a stand up, I'm very much, if you see how I do stand-ups, I don't tell everybody to be quiet. I don't tell the street to stop functioning. I don't tell cars to stop. I don't tell people to stop walking. No, it's life, right? Life is messy. It's not perfect. So getting up close to the person, getting up close to the action is so important, right? Because you want to hear them breathe, and then obviously get your various shots, your medium shot, your wide shot, your close up, and so forth. But I find the closer I am to the person, now obviously it can be uncomfortable, but that's the beauty of these new phones, right? So I've got the iPhone, I don't know what this is, a Pro Max, and you just put it on 0.5 and it's a super wide, right? And it's right up there. So it's good. It's got the cinematic mode, which is absolutely beautiful. Just making sure you've got good lighting on a person like me, because I'm dark skinned, I can't be with the light main source behind me. It has to be always in front of me, right? And the back has to be evenly lit as much as possible. So just making, composition, making sure that they're not smack dab in the middle of the screen, either to the left or to the right. And then just being natural, being in their natural environment. And yeah, just watching your color temperatures and so forth. But that's the beauty about these, like I said, when I was in Ukraine, I basically, Sam, had my camera always on, and it was on the dashboard, always on. And as soon as an explosion goes off, especially if I'm in the hot zone, like on the front lines, I start filming, and I cannot tell you how many times I've gotten pictures and explosions and dramatic moments. That's the beauty of these phones, right? Of this technology that it's so easy to handle, and it's so user friendly, and it automatically, changes with the color temperature and so forth. So it's brilliant. It really is. And a good microphone these days, you can plug in a Rode mic on here, and that's really what I do for stand-ups or for interviews. I remember when I was in South Lebanon, in the middle of Hezbollah territory. This was the game changer, because you don't stick out and you don't look like a journalist. You can do this very quickly. Just clip on. Many times I would just clip on my Rode mic to the person. Just clip it on. Boom, you're ready to go. Easy peasy. So, and it's interesting because I tell people, if there is a cameraman with me, and we're filming, I always tell them to be ready, because I can go in 1,000 directions and they have to be ready, because I don't, when I see stuff happening, I jump on it. I don't lollygag. I'm on it, and so I'm always ready, always ready. And again, it's that part of that curiosity that kind of keeps me going.
Well, George, you fit so much into the last 30 minutes, and I would love to do another 30 minutes with you, but I know you have to run off to an interview that you need to do.
Yes,
So I need to
the
let
nine
you
minutes.
go.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
thank you so much again for sharing with us
Sure.
today, for investing in the next generation of journalists, young men and women who are, in the words of my good friend Joshua Kamunda from Zimbabwe, he said, who are journaling on behalf of God. And I think that's what you're doing too.
Beautiful.
And I mean, I wanted to ask you questions about how you integrate your faith with your work, but I mean, it's so obvious if we
Yeah.
watch your reports, and I will encourage my students, our students, to do that. but they'll
Yeah.
see how you incorporate your faith in your reporting, and that's just a wonderful thing. So I just want to let you go. So I'm going to just wrap up by saying,
Sure.
this was another episode of Pro Tips, where we interview working journalists about what they're doing, telling stories about what God's doing around the world. So check out our website at GNA News for more on Global News Alliance and how you can become part of our team of reporters telling stories about what God is doing in your church, in your city, in your country. And remember to subscribe to us on YouTube to receive notification of future episodes of our Pro Tip series, and to watch tutorials on smartphone journalism techniques. So until next time, may God bless you.